Hello, today I'm going to be talking about an absolute gem of a novel, Minnow Pea by Mark Dunn. So this is an epistolary story. It's told in a series of letters, and it's based off the island nation of Nollop, which is just off the coast of South Carolina. So Nollop, when it was founded, emphasised arts education and specifically language, and then they had a resident called Nevin Nollop that came up with the pangram, the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. Pangram is a sentence that includes every letter of the alphabet in as short a span possible. So you probably know quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog from like demonstrating fonts and stuff like that. They thought that Nollop was a genius, so they decided to name the island and basically everything after him, kind of obsessed with him. They had a monument to him in the town centre that had, the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog on it. And at the start of this, one of the letters off the cenotaph falls off, and the High Council decides that that is Nollop telling them that they shouldn't use that letter anymore. They're not allowed to use the letter in speech or in writing, which means that all of the books have to be destroyed. I think it starts with the Z falling off, and they're like, and the residents are like, we can live without a Z, like we don't need a Z. So they kind of go along with it, but then more and more letters start falling off. It's quite dramatic. Also, there are really harsh punishments for using the fallen letters. It's a 3-strike system, so the first one I think is just like a slap on the wrist. The second is you get to choose between being whipped and being put in stocks. This is so old age, even though it is like modern. And the third is expulsion from the island. I think this book is great for 2 reasons. One, its use of language is so interesting because obviously as they lose letters, since it's written as a series of letters, they're lost from the text as well, so they have to kind of use alternatives, and that doesn't decrease the quality of the writing or like expressions of idioms or things like that, because they do still kind of take a lot of pride in it and then use just more complicated different synonyms to evoke the same thing. So on the one hand, it's just a feat of linguistics to be able to accomplish such a thing. The other is that it is, although it's quite light, it is really, really deeply like Orwellianly disturbing in terms of the totalitarian regime that they're running. As far as I could see, there wasn't any real democracy. There are like 5 High Council members and they get to make decisions on behalf of everybody. So the first tile that falls off, they decree that it is a sign from Nollop, and they sort of deify Nollop throughout the course of this book. At the start he was just like a great man that is the foundation of the spirit of the island, and then he goes on to become, he's sending us messages through these tiles falling down, which is crazy because meanwhile like on the mainland scientists have done tests to be like, no, just literally the cement or whatever they use to stick them up is falling, they are all going to fall. But once the first order to not use the first letter is successful, there's kind of no going back because the people don't realise that it is attacking their civil liberties, and then as time goes on they're powerless to fight it because they are unable to use certain letters. The idea of that is like completely staggering to me. Like, for example, in the book there is a teacher who really struggles to teach because you're constantly worried about saying, one of the letters, and just the idea of trying to eliminate a letter from your vocabulary it just sounds impossible to me. In writing, I can kind of see how that's an easier way to communicate, because you can kind of like think as you go. But if you're trying to have a conversation with somebody, it would be a very interesting skill to learn how to do. But I think it would be so stammering that immediately, even the loss of like an unimportant letter like Z would be just so stammering. It's kind of ironic because by banning a letter, everyone has to think about that letter way more to make sure it's omitted from their speech and their writing. It's one of the surefire ways to identify a totalitarian regime or a dystopian setting, is that the thoughts of people aren't reflected in their actions, and their actions being like the way they express themselves. This book is the perfect example of how things can completely spiral out of control when one act of government essentially is put into place that makes it easier for them to put future ones in and harder for the people to defend themselves against them. One thing that I thought was interesting is that the High Council says at some point, I couldn't find it when I went through it again, and I'm annoyed I didn't dog-ear it, but at some point they say that this is Nevin Nollop thinks that we are becoming complacent with our language and he's trying to challenge us and stuff. But then they say that he's putting us, forcing us into a future, and a more advanced future where language is unnecessary to express ourselves and communicate with one another. I find that really intriguing because in theory we invented language to make it easier to communicate with each other. But if that's just the step on the way to perfect communication, which I guess is just a visual communication and not a verbal communication, so it's like you can just see people's expressions and physical actions reflect everything that needs to be said, and that kind of lends itself towards subconscious communication, like body language and stuff like that, being sufficient or being elevated to the state that it can subsume everything else. It's interesting to think about. I think it's backwards. I think we did invent language because that wasn't enough and couldn't be enough, and verbal and written language was the way to go forward. And as you can see from this book, without that verbal and written language, like despite any kind of punishments and, fear of the regime or whatever, people just struggle to express themselves. And the vast majority of people end up leaving the island. I hope you've enjoyed this video on the increasingly lipographical novel that is Minnow Pea. It has its faults. I think it's a fantastic, really original book, but it does, the characters aren't very interesting, don't care about the subplots whatsoever. And the main character's name being LMNOP is just a bit too on the nose, but it's just, it's fascinating. Would highly recommend, especially if you are a language nerd or into dystopia, because frankly this has all of the hallmarks of it. Hope you enjoyed this video. I'll see you soon for another one. Goodbye. Hello, tiny bit of follow-up from that video. I thought it'd be interesting to find out how much I said every letter in the video, just to see how hard it would be to avoid one. So I uploaded a cut of the video, which is what you've just seen, to YouTube, and downloaded the automatic captions they generate, which is essentially everything I've said, give or take a little bit. And then you write a bit of code to analyze it, and the character that I said the least was a Q. I only used the letter Q 5 times. I used Z 9 times, and then I used J 21 times, V 49 times, X I only used 11 times, but the vast majority of letters were used over 100 times. I used T 625 times, I 430 times, E 676 times. I would be so fucked if I had to try and avoid any of these letters. Now I'm just thinking how cool it would have been if I really planned this video to avoid certain letters and it spelled out some kind of code and I sent you on a weird treasure hunt. But no, I said every letter at least 5 times. I'm guessing Q, 3 times I said Q were from Quick Brown Fox. But maybe I can just see where else Q's are. I can do that, hold on. Quick, quite, quality and quite. Fox, fox, expulsion, text, expressions, example, express, example, express, expressions, express. Why do I say express so many times? I said J for just, jumps, jumps, just, enjoyed, majority, just, enjoyed. Oh my gosh, I use the word just so much. Now I know that I can get pretty much verbatim scripts just straight out of YouTube from what I've done. I'm going to use this technology for evil. This addendum was so worth it.